Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining this session. I'm really pleased to host today Francesca Spagnoli, Dr. Francesca Spagnoli. We know each other from quite a long time. We also worked together, and she was a student here in this university where she completed her degree and then her PhD. So she returns back in a place that she knows very well. And now Francesca is the head of international project of the European network of Living Labs that she will go to present and explaining quite in depth the activities that are carried out by this network. We plan to have 1 hour and a half of presentation and including Q&A. So you can drop the Q&A, the question on the chat, or if you are here in the room, raise your hand and ask a question. Of course, we will do this at the end of the presentations. So now I don't want to spend a lot of time, and I want to leave the floor to Francesca, that she will better introduce herself and the work that she does that is really important in creating, let's say, innovation ecosystems around Europe and not only around Europe. So Francesca, the floor is yours. I'm going to share the presentation and you can start.
Thanks a lot, Francesco. Thanks for the very nice introduction and also for the invite today. I hope you can hear me well. If not, just please feel free to interrupt me. So today I've been asked to present something about the work I'm doing in enacting open innovation and digital transformation of European cities and regions through Living Labs. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Living Labs, so it will be a nice starting question. Perhaps you can just drop a message in the chat. I'm just curious to see how many are familiar with it. But anyhow, I will go into detail today about what Living Labs are, what we are doing, how we started in 2006, and then we further worked hard to implement these methodologies and tools for enacting open innovation around Europe, but not only, also worldwide. So just for starting, I would like to tell you just a few words more about myself, even though Francesco gave a very great introduction. So next slide, please. Yeah, as Francesco said, I have a PhD in innovation management at the Faculty of Economics, done together with Dim and Professor D'Ascenzo, which I'm very proud of. And I think that these activities really helped me well, together with the work we have done together with Professor Bellini at Euroclay's company in working on European funded projects. So I started with him and I worked quite hard already during my, after my thesis, my master thesis, in working in these European funded projects already started in 2009. Then I never left the field, let's say, and I always work half as a senior researcher and half as a project manager in European funded projects. After a postdoc at the National Institute for Nuclear Physics, where I was focusing on the technology transfer of physics projects focused on ICT, I decided to change country and to leave Italy and to move to Belgium, where so I went to Brussels and I was being a senior researcher at IMEC. I don't know how many of you are familiar with IMEC, but this the biggest multinational center in Brussels for nanotechnology and semiconductors. There was also a unit about smart cities, so I decided to really focus my interest as a senior researcher in smart cities, and we worked quite hard with all the several cities in Belgium, working on Internet of Things, on sensor, on ICT, together with citizens through the Living Lab approach, because in fact, the unit was also focusing on living labs and was connected to the University of the Free Brussels University of Belgium. Then I decided to move to the European Network of Living Labs because I was really interested in this topic and I wanted to have the international perspective of how the living labs are implemented around Europe and worldwide. So I started to work for them in several projects, and I have contributed to create, since Euroclays to ENoLL, more than 35 European Commission funded projects in all the kind of fields, a lot of fields, apart from space, I think all the kind of fields. So I was focusing mainly on open innovation, ICT, but also how to enact these kind of technologies in several sectors like energy, environment, smart cities, health and well-being, mobility, transport, a lot of sectors. And this idea of having a true passion for living labs, for enacting open information, and starts from the fact that you can really work with citizens and you can really work with all the kind of actors that should be involved in the technological process when you really want to make a digital transformation strategy. So next slide, please. I want to tell you a bit of our network. So our Nectar Network has been funded in 2006 and established as an association in 2010. As you can see, it's quite spread worldwide. Also in my virtual background, you can see it. And this also should be updated because actually in the past months, we acquired even more members. We are spread mainly in Europe, but also we have 135 members in Europe, but also Asia, America, Africa, and Oceania, especially Australia. And we're working quite hard in implementing this approach worldwide because we are really keen on having this widespread all over the different kind of industries, companies, institutions, and countries. Next slide, please. Our building blocks, how we structure ourselves. So the idea is always to putting the citizens into the driver's seats. So we apply the idea of the European collaboratory. We always use bottom-up approaches, bottom-up methods and tools. We listen what the citizens want and what the users also want, because the idea is that by knowing the real problems, values, and solutions, we can really drive the creation or the transformation of ICT that is effective for institutions, companies, local governments, and even the society as a whole. So this bottom-up approach, it's elaborating the innovation policy, starting with the network with more than 150 members of living labs, with the potential access to more than 50 million citizens across the world continent. This is our reach out to the citizens. And this process, of course, incorporates also other labs, as we know there are a lot of kind of labs, fab labs, learning labs, city labs, collaboratory labs, especially in Spain, as well as the traditional actors of the innovation system. So the universities, public bodies, SMEs and corporations, and other hidden actors, even like the industrial living labs, which have more difficulties in demonstrating the results spread worldwide to the society. So we work a lot on social innovation. We are very keen on involving the society in this process by functioning as a vehicle for systemic change. Systemic change means that you're not implementing a change only in one specific process of the industrial category or the industrial process, but you are applying to the world processes from beginning to the end, and in also involving people, citizen-oriented strategies to implement real inclusiveness policies, engagement, co-creation, and collaboration. And we started everything with the open science approach. So what Carlos Moedas in 2016 said, open innovation, open science, and open to the world is really our motto. So we want to be open as much as possible to everybody, inclusive, but also to apply some open innovation technologies and open science technologies. So everybody should be in the process of creating, but also everybody should be in the process of receiving what we are producing. So that's important that scientists, citizens, publishers, research institutions, and public bodies are involved in a process, sharing an open virtual environment called the lab. That's the idea of the living lab. And as a result, also the industrial demonstration of technologies is seen as a large-scale open innovation ecosystem, as I said, the collaboratory, that is not only about research and innovation, but more participatory approach for implementing research and innovation policies and experimenting for innovations and their sharing and diffusions through the scalable R&DI activities. These include all the processes like from pre-market experimentation to the creation of piloting, testing, validation, and impact assessment of the results that are produced for the society, for the new open ecosystem-based technologies, services, and businesses. So that's our main building blocks. But in the next slides, we can see what we are doing. We work in quite a lot of areas or domains, we can call them. As you can see, the first one is smart cities and regions. And even more now with the new European Commission funded projects and funding available from the European Commission, we're working more towards a concept of the urban living lab approach that I will explain you just a little bit later in the slides. And it's important because, of course, the way ICT and the cities are interacting themselves together is something that is changing our way we are constructing innovation, creating digital transformation for local governments, which of course have a different kind of paces in the different countries of Europe in achieving these results of digital transformation. Apart from smart cities and regions, we are also working on very much a lot of sectors. So health and well-being, and we are coordinating now European Commission funded project called Viralize, which tries to harmonize all the different living labs in the sectors of health and well-being. But we are also working a lot on e-government, e-participation, and this is where the digital transformation strategy is situating itself in this process. As I said, social innovation and also education and artificial intelligence, which is also one of our task force, action-oriented task force that I will present a little bit later, as well as culture and creativity and environment. So we are working in a varied field of sectors. You can ask yourself why we are not focusing on a specific topic, on a specific field, and we don't become experts on this, because Living Lab approach, the open innovation approach we are trying to implement as an international no-profit association, this should be something that should be also open to all the domains. We are not want to focus our efforts only on a specific domain, because we're really thinking that we should be applying this approach, methods, and tools transversally to all the potential kind of domains. Next slide, please. These are the action-oriented task forces I was talking about, just introducing what they are. So we, despite the fact that we are working in different domains and we don't want to focus on a specific one, anyhow, we need to structure our work on a specific kind of working groups and activities. What we are doing, for example, we are having created this action-oriented task force, which are putting together a set of different Living Lab members working on different categories of fields by implementing the same methodological approach. For example, we have the social innovation and digital rights action-oriented task force, which is mainly driven by Living Lab members in Spain and in the UK. We have a specific action-oriented task force in social impact of artificial intelligence that I will just present now in the next slide. One on health and well-being, one on rural living labs, and finally on energy and environment, which are the main topics we are following now also with the European Commission funded projects. And then transversally to this, there are several working groups, as you can see below, for example, culture and creativity, music, mobility, agriculture, and agri-foods, that are also being created as a specific subgroup of the action-oriented task force to implement strategies, activities, and projects in this specific kind of fields. I see there is a question on the chat, and perhaps I can take it already now. Could you please explain a bit about social innovation activities? Since we are here, I think it makes sense. Yes, so we have this action-oriented task force that is working towards implementing social innovation, and we have also some kind of a project. There is one project that is called Social and Creative, which is an Interreg Med funded project, and I can share with you the links later in the chat, that is working on implementing social innovation approaches in the cultural and creative industries. So for example, we are the main coordinating project for other what we call modular projects, which are working in several different kind of subfields. For example, there is a project that is working on fashion that is called Creative Wear, now funded again as Creative Wear Plus, where they are developing basically new the way for doing circular economy for fashion, so restructuring the products, the processes in this specific kind of field to reuse the fibers to make new dresses and new dresses for the citizens. And the idea of social innovation just does mean that we are doing this process already with real citizens, with real stakeholders, with real users, implementing innovation by asking them what they would like to see, how they would like to structure, for example, the product and the fiber into this process. And here at ENoLL, we're also focusing not only on social innovation, but also on the digital rights context. So it's really focused on the social innovation approach in ICT. If you think about digital rights, this means that how we can really use or reuse or re-implement the ICT technologies for making everyone able to access the same kind of information, for example, to have the same rights of using the information and processing the information. So we're working in between the process of creating products, real products through technologies, but also in the approach of using this kind of results, products, and technologies. I hope that, I was answering the question, and you can ask more if you have questions, of course. Then if we go to the next slide, and I was focusing mainly today on the action-oriented task force on social impact of artificial intelligence, because of course artificial intelligence is really the fundamental basis of the work of digital transformation. So we know that digital transformation is not only artificial intelligence or big data or machine learning, it's also, for example, the interaction with other technologies like blockchain, IoT, so Internet of Things, sensors, digital twins, which is a very new word from the European Commission now. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but perhaps we can spend just a few moments at the end to discuss about it, because I think it's really interesting, the digital twins. But today I wanted to focus specific on the social impact of artificial intelligence, because it's a task force that is really working hard today at ENoLL for developing a real digital transformation for European cities and regions. And I'm also directly involved in the activities of this task force through some projects that I'm directly working on for the European Commission at ENoLL. So what we are trying to do with this action-oriented task force is to develop a series of working groups, meetings, joint EU project consortium, series of webinars on the social impact of AI, which means what we're trying to do is to understand what kind of results and impacts we're making in the society by using artificial intelligence as a means for transforming not only the way like local governments or institutions or companies are working, but also the way of citizens are perceiving the use of artificial intelligence. And this action-oriented task force is gathered by a number of living labs, as you can see here. The coordinator is the Computer Vision Center at the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona in Spain. And also there is the Taiwan Living Lab, the Brussels Hub of AI, Epica Lab Foundation in Spain, and others, as you can read in the slides. I will not read it through. We are also part of the European AI Alliance, and I don't know how much you're familiar with it, but the European Commission has just released a white paper on the impact of artificial intelligence, which I can also share the link with you, which I found very interesting. And there are several considerations about policy recommendations on how to implement this digital transformation in European cities and regions. What we're also trying to do with this action-oriented task force is to try to understand that this process can only through a citizen-centric exploration approach of the potential impacts of artificial intelligence develop a pathways to early adoption of what we call trustworthy AI in Europe. This is a proposal for the implementation of the European way for citizen-centric innovation, which is very keen to be developed by ENoLL. And the group also carries out a number of joint actions during the year, including not only webinars, but also events, and hopefully when COVID will be away, physical events, so you will be invited to join this group. We are also trying to understand, to focus how new companies, business models can implement this digital transformation approach through AI, the identification of new labor profiles, and also capacity building needs in terms of trainings by tackling the social inclusion and rising ethical aspects in the role of arts as an engaging tool, but also in the role of AI in different sectors like mobility, transport, culture, and creativity. And at the end of my presentation, I will give you some specific examples on this. But now let's move to the next slide. So what are our living labs? And also next slide, please. Before going to the details and the examples, let's see what are the living labs. And I think you can move to the next slide, please. So Living Labs operates as what we call intermediaries and orchestrators among the citizens, research organizations, companies, and government agencies level, what we call Quadrupoleics Approach. And they focus on co-creating a joint value approach for rapid prototyping and testing and scaling up of innovations and businesses. So we need to think that at the beginning in 2006, when all the Living Labs era started, the idea was that, yeah, we have these technologies, we need to test them, we need to prototype them, and then to validate. And then in the end, we were involving the users just at the end of the process. And I will give you some more numbers about how this was really failing and was really bad for the co-creation of technologies, because involving the users only at the end, it means that you go into the market with something that is not ready or is not perceived as valuable for the users. So the idea of the Living Labs starting from 2006 until now has really changed a lot. So we're not focusing anymore only on the co-development of technologies. We're also focusing on the co-creation approach of new projects and activities and the value together for the users. The idea started also with the fact that we want to have open innovation ecosystems in real life environments. So we want to sit together with the citizens to work together on co-creating the technologies. So if you have an idea of what is a Living Lab, usually it's a big space, can be a research center, can be a company, can be an institution, when you have a big set of rooms with real technologies, or for example 3D printers, any kind of technologies. It depends, of course, on the sectors, where you can sit together with the users, with the citizens, with the stakeholders, and you can create together with them, also starting from the brainstorming approach through the testing of and then the evaluation of the development of the product, let's say. And what is this done? Is done through what we say feedback loop. So iterative feedback processes, because sometimes you develop something with the users, you test, you implement, and it's failing again. So we go back and we try to have also different kind of feedback loops with different kind of users. So it's a very tough project. It's a very time-consuming process, but it's also we found it to be very successful, because in the end, you get test more and more the product before going even not only to the market, but already into the final co-development process. So it takes the citizens and the users in the life cycle approach from day zero, really from the start. We cannot think that involving the user after 1 year of development can be successful, because you don't even know what could be their needs in terms of development process of an innovation. So we also have a wide variety of Living Labs, but all their implementations have common elements. So it's focused everything on co-creation, active user involvement, what we call multi-stakeholder participation, and we will see in the next slide, real life setting, and multi-method approach and orchestration. This means that orchestration means that you have to orchestrate all the kind of users in the same process of creating and generating open innovation. If we can go, please, to the next slide. I want to focus just a little bit more on the Quadrupoleics approach, what this is, how we call it. And now we are even thinking about Quintupoleics approach, but we're still used this terminology. This means that in the process of user development and creating open innovation through ICT technologies, we are involving 4 kinds of stakeholders, which means we said civil society, so citizens, users, stakeholders, government and public sector, which are the ones that usually are more reluctant to be part of this process because it's very technical. And also it's important when we talk about smart cities, so the local governments and public institutions now are even more understanding the need of being involved in this process since the beginning. Then the companies, so industry and business, and finally the academia and the universities. The way these actors are involved is also important to be focused on. So if we can go to the next slide, please. This is a representation of how the actors are involved in a living lab. I start from the bottom, and researchers are the first ones that are involved in the process because, of course, they are generators of the ideas. They have the first, let's say, insight into what they want to create. So they are the content creator, the knowledge, what we call knowledge generators. And then we have the users. So as you can see already in the first process, users are the ones that are participating on the living lab activities. It doesn't mean per se that they will be the consumers of the product, but they are the ones that will be in the panel of stakeholders, in the panel of the user community that will create the technologies through the living lab approach. Then we have the provider, which are, of course, the ones who are providing technologies, infrastructures, or service providers in this context. And the enablers are the financial providers, the ones who are facilitating by putting money into the living labs, this process of technology co-creation. Only at the end, we have the utilizers, which are the customers, the real customers of the living lab, which are buying the product, the technological product that we have co-created together with the users. So it's important to understand the difference between users and utilizers. So the utilizers are the customers. The users for us are really not the ones that are getting the product at the end, but that are co-creating and co-developing the products into the living labs activities together with us. And at the bottom of the image, I put some references because these are the authors of this approach, Seppo Leminen and Dimitri Schurman. And this is a research and quite well and successful proved approach from the research scientists in the living labs. Then if we can go please to the next slide, the living labs, what we call the 3-layer model. It's also important to understand the bigger picture of the living labs, how we work. So in the living labs, we said that we have a 3-layer model, which means we start from the macro approach. So we have a living lab constellation consisting of what we call public-private partnerships. So this kind of quadrupoleics stakeholders that I've just presented to you. And these different levels are working with different research paradigms. As you can see here, the macro level is working, really focusing on what we call open innovation. So it's the complete and full approach for transferring knowledge between different kinds of organizations. Then we have the meso level, which is the specific living lab innovation projects through by implementing methods and tools of the living labs that the different living labs are developing. And this can be several living labs together. For example, when we are working on a European Commission funded project, of course, we try to implement an ecosystem per se into a project. So we don't have just one living lab that is working usually for developing technologies or solutions through the European Commission funded project, but we're working with a set of living labs that can be variable, usually starts from 3, for doing piloting of the technologies and sometimes also already in the different fields into the projects. And up to now, for example, I have a project that is working with 19 living labs. So you can imagine how tough can be to coordinate 19 different living labs in the same project, but it's also very interesting and successful because it can generate different kind of results. Of course, living labs are working in different countries with different cultural backgrounds. So we really value these differences that each living lab is bringing into the process and into the projects. And this is the meso level. The research paradigm that is we are following at the meso level is not only open, but also user innovation, which means, as we said before, real-life experimentation, active user involvement, multi-method and multi-stakeholder approach. And finally, there is the micro level, which is just the individual living lab research steps and activities linked to their stakeholders' assets, capabilities. In this context, the research paradigm is focused on user innovation, user involvement, and contribution for innovation, but it's really focused on one single living lab. That's why we call open innovation the macro level, which is bringing together different kind of living labs, different kind of projects, different kind of public-private partnership, which is really the foundation of the open innovation approach. Then if we go to the next slide, please. This is really important. I wanted to show you, because it's really what I think it's making affecting the living labs, the transnational experimentation. So we talk a lot of opening virtual research infrastructures or real research infrastructure now that hopefully COVID will be away. What we were doing also a lot in the past is to do this transnational experimentation also with staff exchanges. And you can see here, for example, some of the living labs from our network that were working through with this approach, and you can see also the name, so you can have a look. Also on our website we have a list with all the living labs which are part of our network, so you can dive a little bit deep in more about their activities. What the idea of the living labs is also to make these exchanges to learn from each other, to do this kind of a knowledge transfer. And now in the Vitalize project, we are coordinating on the health and well-being sector, as I was saying in the beginning. We were thinking about having these transnational research infrastructure experimentation and staff exchanges, for example, with Canada, and from Europe to Canada, in the specific context of health and well-being. So this is something that really creates for us a value and also change at the end, what is your strategy for implementing a living lab approach or a digital transformation approach. Next slide, please. So I want to show you also the living labs, what we call living labs integrative process, which is our main methodology for living labs. So how we start and how we do the different steps in the living labs approach, I think it's important to show. We said that yes, the stakeholders and citizens should be involved from day zero in this process, but what are the steps? So we say that we have mainly these 4 phases, which are emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. We start from the problem. So what is the problem that we want to solve with our technological solution? We start by selecting a practice. So we understand what is our context, and in the case of smart cities, what is our urban context that we need to research to try to understand also the socioeconomic and cultural settings that are working in this specific context, and we need to make them into account to understand how to change, for example, the behavior and the social practices of the users, or to keep them anyhow into account in the creation of this process. Then we try in the same phase of empathize to integrate already the stakeholders through the public-private partnership model, and to be involved in the process of co-creation and co-development. Then we try to uncover what we say, uncover barriers. So, okay, this is the problem. These are the people that needs to be involved. This is the context. This is our cultural approach. But what are the hidden points that we need to discover in order to create real a product that is really useful for the market? So we are trying to understand these barriers. Then in the third phase, we ideate. We start finally with the ideation, with the ideas, but mainly with the co-designing plan. So to have a common vision and shared goals that enables to mesh up and co-design with the users and not for the users, which is very important.
Sorry for interrupting. Can you please change the slide, because we have gone to the next one?
Okay. Then finally, prototype and test. And these are including 2 sub phases: pilot and intervention, and evaluate performance. So pilot and intervention is something that is happening, of course, with the real life experimentation carried out in the field. And finally, we evaluate, we assess the impact and the measurement, the verification and performance of the solution, also through scorecards to enable finally the scale up in other markets. So we start from the problem space and we get in the end into the solution space. But if you can go to the next slide, please. What is important is to say that living labs are living laboratories more than just labs, as it can be fab labs or other labs, because a living lab is what we call an innovation intermediary, which orchestrates these ecosystems of actors in a region, especially when we're talking about urban living labs. Also, its objective is not just to co-create something, it's more to co-design technological products and services through an iterative approach, as we said, with the key stakeholders. And the result then is the co-creation of social value, of the benefits. So it's important also to understand this difference between co-development and co-creation. In the living labs, we co-develop technologies to co-create a social value for the society. And you can see here also the references to Dr. Mastelic, who has created this very interesting doctoral thesis on stakeholders engagement in the co-design of energy conservation interventions, the case of the Energy Living Lab based in Switzerland. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. Now let's focus on the technological approach. So it's very important to take into account the difference between people desirability of a product, which we start, of course, by involving the users at the day zero in this co-development process, and the technological feasibility, because sometimes what we aim to develop is not something that can be finally be developed coherently. But how the Living Labs helps us in this process, it's very interesting to be seen. So if you can go to the next slide, please. What we bring with the Living Labs is a real impact of real life experimentation. So I want to show you this table, just a few numbers, because I think it's really interesting. So in the first column, you have the status of the technological product: abort, reboot, in development, on the market, and in total, what kind of percentages we achieve. In the second column, you have the Living Lab project. So what we are achieving with the real life test, okay? In the third column, it's what we are usually doing in innovation project that is not focused on open innovation or not focused on the Living Labs. And then we have the total, of course, the overall. So if you focus on the second column, the Living Lab project real life test, as you can see here, a technological product that is developed through a Living Lab has a higher chance to be unsuccessful in the first phases of co-development, which means between 10 and 28% of technological products that are developed through Living Labs have these chances of aborting already in the first phases when the users are involved from day zero. And again, 14% on the reboot phase, which means, so we start to co-develop with the users, we create the first prototype, and then it's unsuccessful. Then we start to create again another prototype, and it might be that it's not successful. This doesn't mean that the Living Lab is not a good methodology, but in fact, it means the opposite. So what we are seeing with the Living Lab methodology when we are developing technological solutions is that since the users are involved already in the first step, they might not be happy with the technological feasibility of the product that is developed. While in the usual innovation projects, which are not focusing on open innovation or not focusing on the Living Labs approach, this has lower chances of aborting at the beginning, but biggest chances of being unsuccessful when it's already on the market. In fact, if you go to row 4 on the market, you can see that between 30 and 60% of the technological products that have been seen to be on the market have resulted to be unsuccessful. And this is due to the fact that, for example, in a Living Lab approach, in the row before, just before, you see between 19 and 53%, which means that we have a lower rate of unsuccessful product because these are already co-created together with the users since day zero. They already have implemented an iterative approach, and they already have been failed more at the beginning, but this also reduces the time consumed to co-create a technology, because it's when we are working also with the Living Lab approach, it's a higher rate of let's say co-development process. So in the end, the time is more or less the same. It's just that you have done more testing, more validation, and which results in a more successful product in the market. So I think this is interesting. You have also, I put here a link from Team Review, which is the journal where usually Living Labs are published. I think it's useful also to understand what is the real impact that we are making with Living Labs in the technological approach. Then if you can go to the next slide, now we go a little bit more into details on how we're doing it.
Francesca, we have a question from here.
Sure.
If you, yes, it's better that you come here close to the microphone, otherwise.
Yeah, if you go to the previous slide, I see that in the section that says on the market, that means that from 19% to 53% of the projects will fail or will succeed.
No, this is the projects that will fail. So as you can see, with the Living Labs, we have a lower rate of failing on the market rather than on the usual innovation projects, because we have done more user testing and validations at the beginning rather than at the end. And as I was saying, this is I think the strength of the Living Lab approach, that you go into the market with products that are more validated and are more reflecting the needs of the users, the final users. Even though they are not customers, we always talk about users, as we've seen in the previous slides, but reflect more what the society would like to see in the market.
And it's quite interesting that the bridge of the difference between 19 and 53% is like 30% that you don't know really that it's going to succeed, right?
Yeah,
so
and
the difference between the lowest rate and the highest rate, it's a lot. It's like 30% of projects that you already tested and you are unsure if they are going to really fail. So how do you manage that with, you know, the resources that you invest or the projects that you approve? So I would like to know if there is some sort of specific methodology or best practice that you develop for this bridge, you know, between the 20 and 50%.
Yeah, you mean in the Living Lab approach, huh?
What?
You mean in the Living Lab approach, not in general?
Yeah, because once you test the project and you accept it for, you know, launching the project and go to the market, you still have a 30% breach of unknown information about if this project is going to work or not. And I don't know if I'm understanding this fully.
No, you understood it right.
So to me, that seems to be a lot. Like, it's not a very certain percentage of failure. So you still have like 30% like floating in the air that you are not sure if it's going to work or not. So how do you decide to invest in this project if you have that bridge?
Okay, I think the next slide can answer to your question. This is also, thanks, how I was envisioning it. And this is before, you have to go after. Yeah, after. Okay, so we have created the set of toolkits based on the Living Lab methodology to make sure that all the projects are working with the same methodologies which are proven and successful, that have been proven to be successful in EU-funded project. Also to reduce this possibility of having higher chances of products development to be unsuccessful. This is one of the methodology that I think it have been proved to be most successful in the Internet of Things concept. So Internet of Things for smart cities. As you can see here from the slides, we have created this approach to have some kind of steps that involve the users in this context. And as you can see on the left, it always starts with the needs of the communities, the trends of the specific communities in the different cities, and the idea generation is the first step. But on the right, you can see already written suggestions and complaints. What does it mean? That we are not just people in the Living Labs that wants to complain every time, but of course the users are the ones that can already in the idea generation phase make some steps, more advanced steps to understand what they are their needs, and if they're not happy with the needs in the end that the technology will produce in the community. So the idea is that by starting already from the idea generation to have the users involved in the process, we already know. Of course, it's not representative of the whole society in the world. We always need to think about the unsuccessful rate is connected to the fact that, of course, we try to involve as much as possible the potential users in this co-development phase, but it's not representative of the whole society. That's why there is still less chances to be unsuccessful, but still some. But with this approach, we really try to bring them into the process from idea generation to concept development, core concept and design, concept evaluation, pre-announcement, and market launch. Finally, the production. So what is changing in the process, in the chain, the value chain of the Living Labs technological development, is that, as you can see, we have more steps than a usual innovation project, because we have only here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 process. And already we try to make pre-announcement and market launch before the final product is finally completed. Let's say also to test what are the trends that are in the market and what are the desirability in compared to the feasibility of the technological approach, as we have seen in the previous 2 slides. And it's also important to understand what are the lead users, what are the first buyers, what are the reference customers, the launching customer, and the requesting customer. So as you can see here, we have in the 3rd layer, the green layer, 5 kind of what we called stakeholders for a technological product, only per se, in the smart cities in this specific context. So we try to involve these potential first set of customers and users and stakeholders overall into the approach in the different steps, but the users is always involved. I've added here a reference also to the Living Lab methodology. Actually, is a PDF that you can download on our website, so you can also freely have a look and download it. And just a little bit more deeper, if you can go into the next slide, please. This is the approach from Euphoriot was the name of the project. Was really focused on the Internet of Things and user engagement toolkit. So not only co-creation, but also user engagement methodologies and tools that you can be able to find into this handbook. We started with the 3 phases. We have 3 phases in total. So we start with phase 1, that is exploration, and is basically focusing on everything that needs to be included in before the prototyping, let's say, from idea generation to understanding the needs of the users, to know the users, because we cannot assume that we know all the users and they have all the different kind of starting points, also in the definition of what they want to have in the end as a technological product. So definition of the intentions, discovering, empathize with the users so they can be more open to share what are their feelings, needs, trends, then examining what is happening in this context and start to conceptualize the idea and framing what are the needs in terms of the technological products from brainstorming, visualization, concept design, and so on. The second phase is about experimentation. So we really go into the interesting part of co-developing the product, starting from prototyping, developing this prototype, deploying it and giving it to the users, experiment with the users, and then testing them by making a pre-launch and validation of this testing phase. Before launching the solution in the evaluation phase, of course, we are trying to understand if there are things that needs to be changed, and we go back to the rebooting phase. Finally, when we achieve the evaluation phase, this means that we have developed the product, we have made the pre-announcement, we have launched it in the market, and it's ready to be by the stakeholder, basically the customers. And in this phase, we also evaluate, and it's important not to miss this step because we need to understand what is the outcome that we have achieved, not only in terms of money produced or achieved or reached, but also in terms of user experience. Are the final customers happy with the solution and with this commercialization of this innovation design? And you can find also more information in the handbook about it. But now we have talked a lot about the digital product. And I think we should focus also a little bit more on the cities, because this lesson is also about how to enact digital transformation in European cities and regions. So if you can go on the next slides, I would like to give you some information first about what is urban living labs, what we call urban living labs, because the idea of these labs that is quite recent. So it started just, I would say, few years ago, around 5 to 8 years ago, is the idea of opening the city as a site for experimentation, for transformation, for co-development. And the Urban Living Labs is also opening this site for active user engagement, and it's easier, it's very easy to do real life setting experimentation in the cities rather than going to a lab and just use the technology as it is per se. So with the Urban Living Labs, we are combining both the work of the users together with the living labbers into the research centers or using anyhow the facilities of the companies and institutions, together with what we call what is happening in the cities with the local stakeholders. And our urban living labs as ENoLL benefit usually from this cross-border co-creation, because we are piloting solutions in different countries, which is something that of course at the international levels brings a lot of value, because you have also a lot of more data to be analyzed in terms of results to be successful and in terms of impact. The term urban lab is also used in different contexts and is not only per se to be perceived as a test bed in the city, but is also more to be perceived as a real co-creation process with a very strongly citizen engagement that makes the difference in the approach. If you can go to the next slide, I just wanted to give you, since we have, we are doing a lecture for students as well. This is just terminology that we use at ENoLL. There are a lot of terminologies of urban living labs, and sometimes they are also not all colliding, let's say, linked. But I think this is the one that mainly explain what we are doing on the ground, because we're really practical. Let's say the living labbers are really practical person as well, even though there are researchers in the process. But I think this definition is interesting because it includes urban living labs as early experimentation gardens embedded in neighborhoods and cities, in which residents, governments, private actors, knowledge institutions interact to design, test, and fine-tune social and technical interventions in real time. This collaborative arrangement marks a shift from incumbent efforts based on government-industry partnerships. At its heart is the idea that urban sites can provide a learning arena within which the co-creation of new ideas and solutions can be pursued. I think it's a very nice definition, because urban living labs, we are working a lot of gardens. And just to start, and I will show you the example from the ENoLL project just later, but also I think the idea of early experimentation gardens makes very efficiently the representation of what we're doing. So we start really in the experimentation phase in the cities, sometimes also in the streets, in the woods, and we're working together in restructuring what is happening in the cities, also through the use of technology with sensors, with IoT sensors, and lots more. Everybody's involved in this process, real time, mostly of the time. And also the end value is a learning process, which I think is really nice. So we're also all learning from each other while we are doing these urban living labs activities. And I added here also the reference so you can have a look later. But what are the key components of the urban living labs? Next slide, please. So we always start from ICT, implementing ICT technologies in this process. But it's important also to take into account what are the methods and tools to develop this approach. The key stakeholders, of course, always the Quadrupoleics approach. What is the innovation domain and also the urban context? So we are doing real life setting in real cities. So we are needs to be even more precise on what are the needs of the citizens, while we are doing something that will effectively changing the shape and the view of the way that they're using and living in their cities, also their behavioral change that is important to take into account in this process. And then financing, also finally, financing business models are important, because how a city can finance itself to make this changing sometimes is not easy to be done. Sometimes we do together with the European Commission funding finally and hopefully, but sometimes they need to find also some models themselves, the local governments, to make these changes into the cities. And the most important part is also the governance models, because there are, of course, local governments, policymakers that needs to have a voice in this process to understand if what is going to be ideated and created for them is fitting their actual practices of governance. Just to give you a snapshot, not to complicate everything, these are the internal roles within an urban living labs. So we have seen some of the actors in a living lab, and here the urban living labs. As you can see, it's quite complex, because we have a different kind of stakeholders, and also the city is big and they have a lot of roles internally to be taken into account. But we always start, so the picture, as you can see, is divided into different axes. So the left axis and the right axis. So in the right one, you can see that we start from the innovator, the user, the problem owner, the financer, the context provider, the usual people that are involved in the living labs. And then here in the left part, you have Urban Living Lab Manager, which is the main coordinator of the Living Lab, which takes into account about all the processes that are happening, all the activities. Then we have the project manager, which is the person that is in charge of a specific project, like, for example, making positive energy neighborhood districts. So he's in charge of this specific project, but in the city there can be another one, like urban gardening for reducing the flood in the city. Something like that. I'm just making up some ideas. So there are different projects, of course, that can be developed into the different cities. Then the human interaction specialist, which is taking care of all the projects, and perhaps there are more than one. The pilot manager and the panel manager. It's important to understand this difference between the pilot and the panel manager. So the pilot manager is the one that is taking in coordination of the real activities in the living lab. So the project manager coordinates all the different procedures more than activities, while the pilot manager is the one that is really working on the real activities with the citizens. The panel manager is what we call the stakeholder engager, let's say. So it's the one that is taking care of developing workshops with the stakeholders to involve them in the user validation and testing, for example. And it's specifically, it's a specific role that needs to be trained in order to be able to make these, for example, stakeholder mapping, stakeholder engagement approaches. So as you can see, an urban living lab is quite complex and we need to take it into account when we want to make digital transformation strategies for the smart cities. Then the next slide, please. The value of urban living labs. So why we have the urban living labs and why we call them this way and why we want to work with urban living labs? Because cities and urban areas are constantly changing. We call it systemic change, and we like a lot this systemic change because this change is taken into account that changes are occurring in transformation is occurring in many different ways, in many different times. And of course, this needs to be taken into account. And also the Urban Living Lab has emerged as a new type of intervention format for leveraging sustainable urban change. We talk a lot now about climate change and how we can make a real change in the cities to make them sustainable. Even more now with these approaches, the value of urban living labs is focused on calling new urban solutions that require experimentation with multiple stakeholders. co-creating tailored policy recommendations, because we never have to forget that we're working with cities. We need to take into account the quadrupoleic stakeholders, which means also policymakers that match the specific local context. And then urban participatory planning also, which this includes citizens in the process of urban reshaping the cities, which I think it's a very, first of all, I think it's very cool, but also I think it's very nice that the citizens can have a voice and to be heard and to really work and practice on this, not just to say what they want to change in the cities. And then also is respecting, of course, the voices of marginalized people for inclusiveness, because we were trying to involve everybody in the process. And then also the urban living labs offer a natural collaboration setting for solving complex and societal issues, and yeah, many others. So that's the idea of the value of living labs. I don't know if there are questions, because then I will go in the next slides into the examples. So perhaps it's better to take some questions now if you have about the urban living labs or others.
No question? No questions for the moment.
All clear. Okay, good. Okay, so we can go now into the details of the use cases and what I called inspirational stories. I hope it's inspirational. And I would like to give you here some ideas of what we are already doing in the cities through the Living Labs, and also through the European Commission funded projects for implementing digital transformations in European cities and regions. So the first example is very I think it's very keen and close to my heart, because I worked directly in this city in Antwerpen in Belgium. And this was a project that was funded by the city of Antwerp, and it was funded through IMEC, the company, the multinational company that I was explaining before, where I was doing my postdoc research in Belgium. So this is called Hackable City of Things, empowering citizens to co-create the smart city of tomorrow. As you can see here, there is a kit, and it's not just a promotional thing. Everybody in the city of Antwerp was trying to be involved to work together with IoT, so Internet of Things sensors. So a lot were assembled together, and we were explaining also the citizens how to assemble them together, and also how to co-create together to make them effective and user accepted by them, to be used in the cities to map what was happening in the city, how we can improve, for example, the quality of life of the citizens in terms of the air quality. And I think it's very successful, and there is a link here, you can see the results. If you go to the next slide, please. It's successful because we reached and we achieved to involve all the stakeholders. So we involved the companies, not only IMEC, but also other companies in Antwerp. We involved the researchers, mainly IMEC. I mean, with we, I mean IMEC, and then the citizens and also the local governments. This was very much sponsored by the local governments of the city of Antwerp, also funded by them, was really needed by the local government. IMEC successfully involved all the citizens in this process. It's basically a large scale and real life living lab overall in the city, where the businesses were testing, developing smart cities applications, products and services. And you can imagine how much have been huge, this digital transformation process, both for the local government, but also for the citizens that were living there, and they were able to access the data that were coming from the cities in real time. We'll be able to also understand, for example, in the city, what kind of transports will be better to be used in a specific time frame from one time to one another. And also the idea was to advance the state of the art of the technologies together with the citizens, with the universities, by granting to everybody the same rights, digital rights of accessing the data at the same time. It's always takes a lot of time, especially to involve the citizens, especially in such big cities. Okay, Antwerp is not a huge big city like Rome, but it's quite a big city for Belgium. And it's quite populated. And as you can think, it has quite a lot of issues in the city. So there were some problems to be prioritized, and the technology was successful in developing solutions to these societal, technological, mobility, air quality, environmental and energy problems. So it was a very much large scale implemented approach, which was proven to be successful. Then if you can go to the next slide, please, I want to focus on one of the Urban Living Labs projects that we are working on since 2017 with the ENoLL is one of the partner of the consortium. The name of the project is ENoLL. It's of course funded by the European Commission. And we are going to close it in November next year. And I wanted to show you all the activities that we have developed in terms of co-creating technological approaches for the Urban Living Lab, so to make it really effective from the previous presentation. So the objective of ENoLL project is to contribute to the development of smarter, more inclusive, more resilient and sustainable cities through the use of nature-based solutions. So what is already available in the cities. In the process, there were involved 3 living labs, Eindhoven, Tampere and Genova. Of course, these living labs, I call them as the name of the cities because they are the living labs of the cities. And we try to establish in them urban living lab demonstration areas for experimentation, for demonstration and evaluation of a different range of nature-based solutions addressing climate and water-related urban challenges, as I was saying before, like flooding, for example, the air quality, the noise of noise pollution, let's say. So what we have done was to use this living lab approach to train the cities in using these methodologies, be familiar with them and use the tools that are coming from the living labs to make the urban living labs digital transformation successful. So we have in the end developed and implemented the cities have developed and implemented their own co-creative nature-based solutions using the urban living lab methodology. If you can go to the next slide. Thanks. Here, as you can see, we were in the woods. And we were doing some testing on a nature trail and nature-based solutions during the Info Day, during the Forest Day Festival. That is something that is happening in Tampere every year in Finland. And we started from the context. What is the problem? What is the context? What is happening in the woods? What we can see with our eyes, with the citizens. And then we were in the second image, as you can see, we were doing a session for kindergarten kids and elementary school pupils to work together on how we can solve the issues that the city of Tampere has through nature-based solutions. And the next one, there is an example from Eindhoven. Of course, next slide, please. Of course, in each city, there are different, thanks. In the different cities, we were doing different activities because what we need to take into account is that any urban living lab has specific activities that needs to be developed, and we cannot just give the same tools to everyone. We can give the same methodology, which is the living lab approach, but of course not the same tools. We need to make them tailor-made. So in the case of Eindhoven, they were a little bit more advanced. So they were focused already on prototyping. So we did 2 things, the one workshop on exploration, one workshop on idea generation, and the third workshop on prototyping. And as you can see here, we really start from the different areas of the city that needs to be restructured or rethink. And here with the prototyping phase, we were involved, the Quadrupoleics stakeholders in this process. So before COVID was really on real life settings and let's say on the ground. And then in the next slide, there is the example from Genova. We were making different kind of workshops. Here in this case was vision making because they were need to start from scratch from the vision. What is our vision? What we want perhaps to change through technologies in our cities. And then we also did the workshop on idea generation. So we started from very specific approaches into the different cities, which makes the living lab methodology interested to be used because basically for every kind of steps that you need to be developed in your transformation strategy, you have different kind of set of tools. And if you go on the next slides, here we created a website, a toolkit that is hosted by unalab.enoll.org, where you can, I think it's very nice because you can go on this website and you can select the phase in which you are working right now, and a set of tools are be presented to you that you can be used and also explained. And there are quite a lot of tools that have been either developed or tested within the project. There are some that are already available in the design thinking toolbox that is a usual methodology that the Living Lab approach is also using. Like, for example, Walt Disney method, 6 thinking hats, ambition settings, but also some others for testing and prototyping. I don't know how much you're familiar with them, but yeah, there are quite a lot that have been also available in this design thinking methodology, but some that has been created directly for the Living Labs, like the open innovation kind of hackathons and activities. So we disseminated this through events, flyers, social media, and if you go to the website, it's open, it's free for everybody, and you can have a look, and you can, every time you need to work on a specific process for Living Labs, you can check for them. But we didn't do only this. We also worked on an Urban Living Lab, what we called framework. So we worked a lot with canvases that we made ourselves on paper, and we tried to understand also in the different cities what were their needs to co-create a framework that could have been integrated with the different Living Labs. Because of course we're working with different cities, but at the end we need to achieve the same common goal of creating, in this specific case, nature-based solutions, innovation for experimentation through ICT infrastructures and the development of solutions in the urban context together with the citizens and the different kind of stakeholders. So we have created a methodological approach that we have included in one handbook. Next slide, please. You can also find this handbook on the ENoLL website under materials. And this can be downloaded, and basically includes different kind of sources: the Urban Living Lab framework research and the framework that we achieved to create, the Urban Living Lab tips and tricks on how to use the methodologies and tools, the trainings, and the experiences we had. So I think chapter 6 is very nice because it gives you an idea of common pitfalls in setting up a Living Lab. Of course, we don't say that Living Labs are always successful. We need to take into account of the unsuccess, and then to make them like a learning process to improve. So here you can find also Living Lab struggles, how to manage the dropout rate, for example, because since we're working a lot of with the users and citizen engagement, sometimes it's very difficult to engage with them, and this is the main pitfall of sometimes having working on an Urban Living Lab framework. Then other things that we have done here, I think I'm presenting this because it's the most complete project that we have done on Urban Living Labs, since it's quite a new approach. We have created a roadmap for Urban Living Labs with a set of cards, 7 decks of cards, each deck representing one key component of the Urban Living Lab framework, as we've seen before. The pyramid, the urban context, the infrastructure, the key stakeholders, the financing business models, governance model, approach, methods, tools, and nature-based solutions. And in the cards, as you can see here, there is a barrier that needs to be overcome. And there is also how to overcome it, or to stop and to start to rethinking again. Out of this, we have created a game. Next slide, please. That for now, it's only like a physical game on paper. And that was working together with these cards just to see how to work in the process, like a little bit of Monopoly, if you are familiar with it. I don't know if it's the same naming in all the different countries, but it's something similar that helps the cities. And mainly here, the co-creation game was done for the local governments. So the people working as project manager in the local governments to try to understand how to restructure these activities. Now we're trying to put it in a digital version because of COVID, of course, but still working on it. And then a set of trainings. In the end, capacity building trainings is always important to give the right knowledge to the different living labs working in this process. So we work hard in making these kind of trainings mainly physical and virtual sometimes, and I will show you later our approach for capacity building program. Then the last few examples now really focus on artificial intelligence. These are two projects which I'm working right now together with this action-oriented task force of ENoLL on the social impact of AI, DT for Regions and the Living in EU initiative. These are activities supporting the uptake of mainly artificial intelligence, but also digital transformation projects for European cities and regions. For example, starting from DT for Regions, this project aims at becoming the European platform for regions to enable specifically artificial intelligence and big data collective solutions. It is in fact defined as a challenge-based innovation platform for the development of tools and services that are relevant for local governments, public interest, and the idea is the final goal is to enhance public administration efficiency and effectiveness in using and developing user-centric services, focusing also on trainings, capacity building actions for public servants and citizens, but is specifically focused on AI and big data. While Living in EU, it's an initiative created in 2019 by ENoLL together with other networks such as the Open and Agile Smart Cities and Eurocities, strongly supporting this declaration, Join, Boost and Sustain, which invites the European decision makers of cities and communities to bring economic and social benefits of the digital transformation to all local communities, and also to implement these digital transformation strategies in Europe. Part of this is also very relevant is the skills development and capacity building of these local governments, because sometimes they say, yes, we want to develop digital transformation, for example, here for 300 million Europeans, and now more than 100 cities have already signed this declaration. But it's also important to support them in this training process, which includes, as I said before, not only artificial intelligence and big data, but also other contexts of digital transformation like blockchain, robotics, Internet of Things, digital twins, and so forth and so forth. If you can go to the next slide. Yes, thanks. These are the principles for the Living in EU initiative. So the signatories agree all on a citizen-centric approach based, of course, on living labs, a city-led approach, working together with citizens, open innovation ecosystem approach, ethically and socially responsible, so very aligned with the Living Lab methodology. And this should be the European way of digital transformation forward for cities and communities, working with technologies as a key enablers, and also interoperable digital platforms based on open standard, open innovation, and open science. Here we are leading the capacity building strand, myself in detail, and we are going the next exciting few years to train the local governments signing the declaration to implement this digital transformation approach coherently and consistently. Then in the next slide, please. Some examples about what we are doing in terms of digital transformation of AI in the action-oriented task force of ENoLL. Here you can see, and also with the members of ENoLL. We have 3 different examples on opportunities for citizen engagement for unveiling the social impact of artificial intelligence. So in the first case, our colleagues from Epica Lab Foundation in Badalona in Spain are using performing arts, and perhaps you also know them as La Fura del Baus. Performing arts has a very original way of approaching these new technologies with citizens. So they're involving them as actors, using the technologies, creating public performances not only with the citizens, also with researchers, providers, decision makers, with the aim of engaging them in actual issues that artificial intelligence puts on the table in the cities. This provides the experience-based evidence for all the stakeholders for understanding the impact of these AI-based tools and services on the society. And this experiential approach provides also the background for anticipatory regulations that citizens need to have. and provides also pathway to living labs as a regulatory learning tools. That is also a working group that we are doing together now with jointly with the European Commission and the Joint Research Center in Italy. In the other example, our colleagues in Thessaloniki in Greece are the leaders of the working group on mobility from the CERT institution, in which they are developing in the city new tools for autonomous driving cars. This will represent, for example, enormous change because it's connecting two different kind of sectors. So the ICT sector with AI and the transports in the way that mobility is being experienced in our own cities by all the local actors, and will affect them from the start with huge business opportunities under a test before invest approach. This is very important. So what we were saying before with the rates and percentages of abortion of technologies is that the Living Lab approach is working on a test before invest approach. And that's why we can invest in the right direction also with Living Labs. And also the colleagues from CVC, the Computer Vision Center in the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, developed Carla, a virtual simulator for autonomous driving training, which provides a nice example on how our cities can deploy a digital twin for mobility transition. And here we go back to the digital twin, that is a representation, a virtual representation of real life, of how real life is working through technologies, through different kinds of technologies, including also AI and sensors, IoT sensors. Finally, another example is related to the Library Living Lab in Barcelona in Spain, which has explored how the technology transforms the cultural experience of people. And it has contributed to the transformation of more than 230 public libraries in the Barcelona region only, by changing the role of the public space from a repository of books to a place for people to gather and exchange their knowledge, develop innovation actions together with the demonstrators obtained from the research centers, and also become scientists through citizen science approach. And this is a nice way where Living Labs can work with citizens and researchers to create data, to explore data, and to get results out of the data. In fact, citizen science appears itself as an excellent vehicle for citizen engagement per se in Living Labs, and also in research and innovation actions within the digital transformation process of European cities and regions. Next slide, please. Final slides about examples. So in this context, the initiative Experiment AI, funded by the Spanish government, allows researchers and technology centers to bring together in their AI demonstrations processes into the network of public libraries, as we can see, igniting a process of discussions based on experience, developing potential futures in a co-design process with all the stakeholders. But also this is complemented by the discussion on the different dimensions of the social impact of AI with, for example, philosophers, social scientists, policymakers, different kinds of stakeholders of the large and small industries to advance in the definition of an acceptable pathways for the early adoption of artificial intelligence products, services, and their associated processes. So these were my examples. And now, if you want to learn more about Living Labs, as I said, we have in our Knowledge Hub library hosted under our ENoLL website some methodologies that you can directly download as a PDF files. We also do every year an innovation award, Living Lab innovation award with all some case. I mean, in this PDF you can find all the different best practices and cases that have won the awards during that specific year, and we just released one for 2021. And here you can also find research publications, case studies, and books. And this is, of course, the result of years of experience from the members of ENoLL, from our office, and from also supranational institutions such as the European Commission, United Nations, so OECD, the World Bank, and others with whom we are collaborating directly. Then, apart from these, that are just things that you can download, we have also a capacity building program that is a tailor-made mentoring plan, learning lab training and mentoring for specific for organizations, but also for individuals to learn more about Living Lab. We have a set of tailored lectures, workshops. We do both online and physical presential mentoring courses. And we have also the Virtual Learning Lab, that is an online learning course that I will explain a little bit more in the next slide, please. So the Learning Lab is a website where we have at ENoLL, where we can find all the information about Living Labs. As you can see here, it starts with an entry meeting, understanding what are the needs for the training. Then we create a mentoring plan. We select the experts that are needed for a specific case. For example, if you are a Living Lab, you can have a specific interest in business modeling of Living Labs, which you are less familiar with rather than all the others. And then we create together a roadmap. We have face-to-face training, site visits, online trainings. And then finally, if you successfully completed our e-courses, you get a certificate on Living Labs. In terms of knowledge materials, next slides, we have a lot of webinars. Some are also for free, and you can find it on our website. We have made some webinars on the Urban Living Lab framework, Living Labs for public administrations, for field tests labs, and also from our cities, from our Living Labs, as you can see here, Başakşehir Living Lab, from Turkey, Espetek, Eindhoven, and much, much more. Then we have a series of podcasts on our website, which are also, can you go to, yeah, thanks, which are for free. So like, for example, how not to work as a Living Lab, how to work effectively as a Living Lab, and how not to miss the chance to get support from the citizens, and also how to work with children in Living Labs, because we work also with a lot with children in kindergartens. And we have also this series of handbooks and toolkits. And finally, the Learning Lab Day. We do an annual event that is called the Open Living Lab Days, and that is running usually in September, where we have the opportunity to get a Day Zero Learning Lab Day. So learning about the key components of the Living Labs, really starting from scratch, also for people that are not part of a Living Lab. We have this hands-on fast track training on the specific cases that you might have in your city, or that you might have in your companies, or that you might have in your business cases, students' cases to be developed. As you can see here in the next slide, during this event, we have done quite a lot of these Learning Lab Days all together, supporting the trainings and also the co-creation through workshops. And in the next slides, that is the example of the virtual learning lab that we have just run and finalized for this year. So every year we have 2 different programs. So the same program repeated twice, actually. It's an 8-week learning lab program which combines expert presentations, hands-on co-creative sessions and interactive discussions with real-life case studies, but also assignments. So every topic, every sub-program has a specific hands-on assignment, application of learning materials, sometimes also working with other people enrolled into the online course. Is basically, of course, virtual means online course, and then expert and peer-to-peer support and networking. As you can see here on the right, the Learning Lab program of this year was focused on these specific topics: how to set up a living lab, stakeholder engagement, co-creation in a living lab, real-life experimentation, governance models, how to create value in living labs, business modeling, and ACMA Living Lab, which basically means how to evaluate the living lab. The program consists of weekly scheduled sessions to attend, as well as some learning assignments in various cases, which I think it's also, let's say, real cases that can be beneficial. So if you're interested to learn more about these living labs, you can join us for next year. The program should start in between March and April next year, and you can enroll through our website. It's open to everybody. You don't have to have a living lab already in place. And thanks. I think this is leading to the end of my presentation, and I will open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francesca. There are questions from here, or Irina, come here. Irina is one of our PhD students with Adriano, and Irina actually is preparing a thesis on smart cities.
Yeah,
so
I know digital ecosystems in smart cities. And I also
you can also unmask it.
Oh yeah, okay. And I also take part in the lab of Professor Sapienza and Professor Bellini, so they're almost
nice.
the same track. Yes,
interesting topics.
Yeah,
For
very
sure.
much, very promising. And thank you so much for this presentation. It was very interesting also because me and Professor Bellini also, we worked on this topic some month ago. And my question is, how do ENoLL interact with the other research and innovation institutions such as digital innovation hubs or competence centers or science and technological parks, if they do, of course?
Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot for the very nice question. Yeah, so we worked a lot with all the other different kind of technology centers. First of all, in the Living Labs, we have a lot of members that are coming themselves from research centers. For example, we have the SPITEC in Spain, that is one of the biggest technological research center of Europe. And also we are collaborating a lot with non per se, let's say, Living Labs research centers, like for example Digital Innovation Hub. We are part now of a network. We are going to be trying to be part of one of the projects proposals to be funded on digital innovation apps as associated partners. Of course, we are not per se digital innovation apps, and we are not aiming to be such kind of research centers, because we are a bit different, but we want to be integrated and complemented with all the actors that are working in this process, of course, to collaborate together to create results and digital transformations in Europe. So we are working a lot with competence centers and also research centers like the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. In fact, together we have some kind of a memorandum of understanding for collaboration, and specifically with the European Commission and the Joint Research Centers, we have some 3 working groups working together on zero pollution, on energy topic, and also on this regulatory tool, Living Labs as a regulatory tool. And after the discussion with us and exchanges, also the Joint Research Centers has created one Living Lab in Italy, close to Milan, and focused on 2 topics, one on energy and environment and another on mobility. So they have also an open call where companies can apply to use the facilities of the Joint Research Center to test and implement through a Living Lab approach. So we are trying to make as much as possible this collaboration effective and complementary. So we really value these kind of collaborations.
Thank you so much. I also have another question.
Sure.
Do you use the tools of smart specialization in Living Labs? And
yes.
do you promote the strongest features of the cities and regions in your activity? Or...
Yeah, we work a lot with the smart specialization strategies, and also when we do our annual conference, we try to align the topics also to the topics of the smart specialization strategies. Of course, we are an international association. We are trying to make the biggest picture out of the process. We're not focusing on some specific smart specialization strategies for each region, because it will not make sense, of course, but we are trying to promote what the different Living Labs in the different countries and cities and regions are developing within this context of the smart specialization strategies.
But why doesn't it make sense to be based on the smart specialization, on regional smart specialization strategy?
Because we are not per se, we are not Living Labs developing specific activities in a region. We are an international association, or profit association, and what we are trying to do is to coordinate the work that the different regions and cities are developing, or promote and collaborate with them. Of course, what I'm saying is that we are not focusing on one specific specialization strategies, but we're working on promoting all of them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Other questions here online? Okay.
Yes, if I may add a comment just to enrich the discussion.
Yes. Sure.
Yes.
Please, can you introduce yourself? Because I can't see who is talking.
Sure. Yes, my name is Margarita Angelito. Okay. I am a smart cities expert. I also did my PhD in smart city strategies and 3 postdocs on the subject matter, and I'm an expert of the European Commission on these topics. I think that it would be very interesting to discuss a little bit what this opening up of the Living Lab approach to the urban environment actually is how this process is elevating the living lab approach. What the urban environment really has to offer in order to improve the living lab approach. Because I don't know whether you have been working in the analysis of the contexts in which living labs take place. I'm sure you have, but it's nice to say a little bit about why the urban environment is an ideal place to co-create and test those solutions. For example, it offers a richness of stakeholders. It offers the opportunity to experiment across different areas of urban life and public life, also combining different urban functions. So I think that this would be a really nice aspect to actually try to understand what the added value of implementing the living lab approach in an urban environment is. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Angelita. So, as I was saying before, I think the real added value is the fact that we always say experimenting in a real life environment, in a real life settings. But when we started in when the Living Lab started in 2006, it was really on a research centers basis. So really working with these technologies in closed rooms in the research centers. And it was difficult to get the citizens into the research centers. So it was successful in the end, but it was also very complex. Now with the urban living labs and the use of urban environments, it's first of all much easier because you have already the citizens contributing in these real life settings, and also they really understand what are the issues, the problems and the needs to be achieved and reached in the urban living labs. And also I think it's easier to get them on board because they also, with this discussion, the world discussion about the climate change and everything, they are more conscious, and this is the right time for them to be more involved in the process. So I think this understanding, putting them at the same level of the researchers and the local governments and the companies in this quadrupoleics approach, it simplifies everything and also improve the steps of arriving to the same final point of getting the solution ready and up and running and successful into the context of the society, because we are not even talking here anymore about the market, it's more about the societal approach. And I think it makes everything less time consuming, more successful, and more easy also to recruit people for the panel managers of the living labs working in the different cities. And last but not least, don't miss the local governments. They were not used to this approach 10 years ago. They were not used to be involved to understand even what a living lab was or how to make technological solutions successful for their cities. Now they are even more open to it and reflective and able and also ready to get this process happening, because it's what everybody is requesting from different kind of governments, from local to international governments. And it's easier to get on board the city's representatives, both from the policymakers to the project manager of a city, and they understand really very coherently why they need it. So it's I see it's successful and it's making effective also in the co-creation of value for them, not only for the citizens, but also what they want to do in the city together with the citizens. That will be my answer.
Thanks, Francesca. Thanks, Margherita. Any other question? Any other curiosity? So we are perfect on time, and also people for the other lesson are starting to pushing outside. So we have to, I think we have to close. Thank you very much, Francesca. I will make the slides available for the students, as well as the recording of the lesson that will be uploaded on the course area that is for the students, that only students are allowed to enter there. And thank you very much, and let's keep in touch, of course, as usual. And have a nice day, and all the best for your work.
Thanks a lot, Francesca, again for the invite, and for the students and the other listeners to my intervention. I hope you find it nice and interesting. And yeah, so we'll keep in touch. And yeah, all the best for all the students in the course. Good luck.
Thank you. So bye-bye, everybody, and see you on Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.